I went to Binghamton University for 2 years. I quickly made a big group of friends there, and we'd go out every weekend. One weekend, on a Friday night in October, when my group didn't have any big plans together, me and 2 other close friends decided to hang out in the school nature preserve by the lake. There was this little clearing on the far side of the lake that was convenient for fires since it was so far from the view of the school or campus security. Kids would sometimes, but not often, come here to smoke pot, drink, and do basically all the other drugs. It was a relatively unknown spot on campus for most, and we liked that about it. Tonight, we just brought a bunch of beers, lit a fire, and hung out, having what we referred to at the time as a brochette. As the night progressed, time seemed to pass quicker as the alcohol began to take effect. Eventually, it got to the point where we were all laughing so hard that one of my 2 friends was on the floor, rolling in the leaves. That was when my other friend stopped laughing and went, "Shoo." We all perked up and listened, hearing the crunching of leaves and branches in the distance. We threw our bottles in the lake since we were all under 21, and it wasn't unheard of for campus police to come through the woods on weekends to catch kids doing drugs. We tucked the rest of the beers into a backpack. I was moderately drunk, so my paranoia was higher than usual. That was probably the case for all of us. The fire exposed us to anyone passing through the woods, but the thing is, this spot was so unknown and far from campus that it was rare to find anybody else that deep into the woods. It sounded like just one person in the distance. The sound of a tree branch snapping not too far away freaked all of us out. None of us were really the confrontational ones from our group, so we were lacking that one person who would have the confidence to stand up and yell out to whoever was out there. Instead, we all just sat in silence, shushing each other. We heard what seemed to be somebody or something circling us, or at least walking around in a C shape around our little campsite. It literally started to feel like we were in the movie The Blair Witch Project, because these sounds in the near distance, like cracking tree branches and leaves crunching on the ground, kept echoing over to our campsite. We laughed about it at first, but I personally soon became terrified of who or what it could be. Out of the blue, a huge thud made all 3 of us jump. At first, I didn't understand, even though I saw what caused the sound. It took me a few seconds to digest the fact that a branch had been thrown into the center of our little fireside. One of my 2 friends took off running, while my other friend and I sat behind, looking at each other, half laughing, half concerned. I felt like we didn't know yet if this was some kind of joke or not. Then my friend let out a scream of pain as he was struck in the face by another tree branch. I grabbed the backpack, helped my friend up off the floor, and we hauled ass back in the direction of our dorm. When we made it to the road separating the nature preserve from our dorm, we stopped to catch our breath. But whoever was out there proved to be following us when we heard footsteps coming closer to the road. We continued to run back to the dorm, and when we got back to our floor, we found our other friend in his room already. We looked out of his room window down to the woods. There was someone pacing back and forth by the woods, and every time a car passed, they would walk back into the woods. Eventually, whoever it was went back into the woods for good, never to be seen again by us. We continued our drinking session in the dorm room, and within 10 minutes, we were all laughing about it. It wasn't until the next morning that we all realized how terrifying that experience actually was. We never really went back into the woods past dark after that. This story happened almost 10 years ago, late summer 2006. I was an 18-year-old freshman in college. I went to a tiny college at the opposite end of the state I lived in. I lived in the basement and ground floor of an old dorm. My floor was men only, but the floors above us were women, and then the other side of the dorm was all men. I have some stories that are sort of creepy, but this one takes the cake. At the time, it didn't really click as that creepy. Hindsight is 2020. I was young, naive, and full of you know what. I was in the best shape of my life at 6 feet 2 inches, 180 pounds, and handsome. I'm 10 years older now, though, and I put on 100+ pounds. I was a young, good-looking college guy in my dorm. There was a communal bathroom for all 20 guys to share, 2 stalls, 2 urinals, and 2 showers. That was it. One of the showers had an air vent that was about 7 feet up, but on the outside, it came out on the ground level. Well, one hot summer day, I'm taking a shower and just talking and joking with the guy in the next shower behind me. All of a sudden, I hear someone else talking to me. I think that maybe someone has come into the bathroom and wants to use a shower or something. That thought quickly leaves my head as I realize that the air vent has been opened, and the dorm's maintenance man and janitor is now looking at me through the vent. This guy was 50 years old and looked like the actor Clint Howard, the ugly redneck guy in a lot of Adam Sandler's 90s comedies. He had a thick Appalachian accent. He somehow knew my name. I don't remember ever giving it to him, but I had said hello to him a few times. He was also trying to make small talk. It was very weird. I mean, I was weirded out by the college janitor peeping on me and then trying to start a conversation while I was showering, but for some reason at the time, it didn't really register that what he was doing was super creepy and illegal. I just thought he was being weird, and I politely asked him to close the vent. The guy in the shower next to me told me that the janitor did that all the time and he thought it was weird and creepy too, but harmless. I guess it was a huge joke that the best time to shower was later at night until the perverted janitor tried watching and started making conversation. It was apparently a common occurrence on my floor. My floor was mostly made up of the freshman football players. I was not one of them, and I guess the janitor liked to talk to these guys about the team in football through the air vent while watching them. I still shudder at that thought. I would see the janitor occasionally around the dorm after that, but I never experienced him spying on me again, thankfully. I also never told the resident life or college administration about the janitor doing these creepy things. I hope maybe someone spoke up one day and maybe he was fired, but who knows? My name is Kieran. I graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, in 2015. My college experience was perfect. I was part of a frat, I managed my studies well, and spent just the right amount of time chasing girls. I'm actually still friends with a lot of my old frat brothers, and I recently got engaged to my fiancée Kaylee, whom I also met at Berkeley. If you had asked me my opinion of Berkeley when I was a freshman, though, I can assure you that my answer would be very, very different. What I'm about to tell you was one of the main reasons why I was never overly ambitious in high school. The Berkeley atmosphere was extremely foreign to me, and it was weird being surrounded by so many self-proclaimed high achievers. As a freshman, I was quickly swept up into the frenzy of career development and planning the next 30 years of your life as an 18-year-old. Silly, I know, but that was the nature of my school at the time. If you wanted to get any sort of offer in the business world, having a strong LinkedIn profile was a necessity. I can still remember the stress of cultivating a professional image online as if my future hinged on which people I connected with and what skills I listed. Regardless, I checked all the boxes and began my search for a summer internship. It wasn't long before my inbox chimed with an actual meaningful message. To my genuine surprise, a prestigious business firm had reached out to me, expressing interest in my profile. It wasn't one of those bot messages either. The substance of the message indicated that this was actually a unique message designed specifically for me. I read it over like 6 times before finally responding, and after about a day of brief correspondence, I was invited to a first-round interview. I spent hours researching the company so I'd know what to expect come the interview and prepped myself with all the sample questions I could find. I soon got a message from a guy named Leonard Slawinski. I'll never forget that name for as long as I live. He stated that he was to be my interviewer. And naturally, the first thing I did was do some background research on the guy. However, excitement soon gave way to puzzlement. I scoured LinkedIn for Leonard's profile, expecting to glean some insight into the person I'd soon be meeting. Strangely, I found nothing, no trace of their professional footprint, no social media. Nothing. I shrugged it off, attributing it to perhaps a preference for privacy or something like that. Leonard and I agreed on a day and time, and he gave me the interview location. I searched it up on my phone and realized that it was some random coffee shop in Oakland. This is when I started getting confused. Why would an interview not take place in Berkeley? We had tons of coffee shops and perfect places for interviews in our college town, so I was just perplexed. The address online seemed pretty normal, though, so I didn't think much of it. A day before the interview, I told my friend Marcus about the situation. He was even more confused than I was, telling me that the situation seemed fishy. I agreed with him, but I figured it was worth it for the position I might be getting. He asked me how I was getting there, and I told him I was Ubering. He offered to give me a ride as he wasn't doing anything at the time. I thanked him and took him up on his offer. Little did I know, I might not even be telling the story if he hadn't offered to drive me. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, and Marcus rolled up to my dorm. Admittedly, I was extremely nervous, and this was one of my first interviews. I got in the car, and we were off. 30 minutes later, I told Marcus to drop me off on the street as I didn't want to be seen having a friend drop me off for an interview. I thanked him, and he offered to wait for me. I asked him if he was sure, and he smirked, pulling out a big bag of weed from inside of his dashboard. I left then, shut the door, and walked a couple of minutes to the location. Frozen in my tracks, I looked up at the literal construction site in front of me. There was no coffee shop. Even stranger, this entire area wasn't residential at all. All the buildings looked closed or private. Confused, I double-checked my phone and confirmed that I was in the right location. This entire block must have been recently demolished, so recently that even Google Maps hadn't updated. I pulled out my phone to call Marcus, but before I could, a booming voice rang out behind me. "Kieran!" exclaimed a deep voice. I whipped around and was met with the appearance of an absurdly tall man wearing an expensive-looking black suit. Thank God, I thought, grateful that this whole ordeal hadn't been some kind of setup. His presence was commanding yet oddly out of place amidst the derelict surroundings. I should also note that the car he was standing next to was a matte black Bentley. He walked toward me with a confused look on his face. We shook hands, and when I asked him about the construction site, he said he was just as surprised as I was. He furrowed his eyebrows and put his hand on his chin. "You know what, why don't we find someplace else?" "Get in," he said, motioning towards the Bentley. He walked back to the car and shouted over his shoulder, "Shotgun's all yours." Without another word, he got in the front seat and shut the door. Excitedly, I followed. I walked around the car just to admire it a little and couldn't help but glance into the back seat. I expected to see the beautiful leather seats that you would expect in a Bentley, but instead, my eyes met a sight that sent a chill down my spine. Lying flat on the ground, obscured by the shadows, was a man. In his hand, he held something long and metal. Panic surged within me, my mind racing with the implications of what lay before me. This was a trap. I turned away from the car and ran as fast as I had ever run before. I heard the man yell my name from behind me, but I didn't even turn around to look. As I ran, I heard the one sound I was dreading, screeching tires. I shot a glance over my shoulder and saw the car turning around, pointing in my direction. I had to think quickly. There was no way I was going to outrun a car. It wasn't like I could just escape the situation. There wasn't really any open space around me, just an endless maze of streets. I could feel the terror coursing through my veins. I made it to the next intersection and faced a choice that may have decided my fate, left or right. Logic told me to just turn left as it was closer, but my feet chose for me before my brain could. I sprinted across the street to the right and darted down the road. I knew I didn't have long, 10, maybe 20 seconds at most. As if by some miracle, one of the buildings in front of me had a fire escape that looked just low enough to jump onto. With every ounce of strength I had, I vaulted myself upwards, grabbing onto the ladder. I had never done a pull-up in my life, but in my mind, this was life or death. I made it up the ladder and kept climbing. The Bentley whipped around the corner and stopped on the street in front of the building. I couldn't see the driver, but I knew he was looking at me. There was nothing else I could do. If they chose to follow me, I'd just have to fight. The next minute felt like an eternity. The car stood there a little while longer and then accelerated down the street, turning left to never be seen again. I couldn't breathe. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, basically screaming into the phone about what happened. I stayed on the fire escape until he found me. I got in the car, and we sped off in silence. The aftermath of this whole thing was pretty uneventful. I sort of blocked it out of my brain and refused to talk about it, even with Marcus. As far as I was concerned, it never happened. But as much as I tried, there are times, like right now, when I can't help but recall every horrifying detail of what could have been the last day of my life. I never shared this story with anyone. I was always too afraid to be judged for it, so it's something I buried deep down until my friend brought it up the other day. We both have daughters now, and we were talking about how we could educate them on being safe when they're teenagers and start experimenting with partying. When my best friend and I were 17 years old, we went to the beach for spring break with a couple of our guy friends. My friend was talking to this guy that she had met through mutual friends, and he wanted us to meet up with him at a house that he and his friends had rented together. Our guy friends had ditched us to meet girls, so we decided to go ahead and go to her friend's house to hang out with them. When we got there, it was still the middle of the day, and we were taken inside and introduced to everyone. It turns out that almost all the guys were on a basketball team at the same university. We all hung out, and they were all drinking, but my friend and I were not. One guy came out with 2 glasses of what appeared to be whiskey and Coke. Against my better judgment, I started to sip it, as did my friend. There was one guy who appeared to be not athletic, and he was the only person at the house who was not being friendly toward us. I'll call him Vincent. Suddenly, I started to feel very buzzed. We were laughing and talking, and one guy asked me to put on his jersey. I grabbed it and put it on over my clothes. "No, take your clothes off and put it on," he said in an aggressive tone. I was feeling more tipsy at this point, and I knew something was wrong. Our parents had let us drink with them multiple times, so I knew what it was like to be drunk. I knew how much I could handle before I was drunk, and one drink never made me feel like I was getting wasted. "Hey, quit babysitting that drink." "Drink up, weakling," one guy said as they all laughed. Even though I had stopped drinking, I still kept feeling more and more buzzed, especially since our drink barely tasted of any whiskey. My dad always had whiskey at home, and we would drink a couple of whiskey Pepsis on occasion. I would feel relaxed, but this was much different. "We should go. Our friends are waiting for us," I said as I headed to the door, and a couple of guys stood in front of us. No, not so fast. You can't leave. Come sit down over here for a little bit," they said as they ushered us back to the couch. This sinking feeling hit my gut, and I just knew that we were on borrowed time. Trying to stay calm, I laughed and said, "I need to pee." "Come with me," as I grabbed my friend's hand and we went into the restroom together. We both stood there, and we had already read each other's minds. I put my hands on her head and looked her in the eyes so we could both focus. "We need to leave right now," I said. Our phones both had spotty service, and I'm guessing because there were so many people packed on it. "Take my keys. Tell them you are going to get your purse, and I'll stay here. You go get the guys and come back for me." I knew this plan probably wouldn't work. But my mind was going crazy, and we had to try something. As I opened the bathroom door, Vincent was standing there, and my heart sank. He was rude to us earlier, and he probably heard us talking. "Hey, follow me and be quiet." Something inside me trusted him with everything I had in that moment. We followed him down the hallway to a garage and out to the front driveway. "Hurry up, get out of here now," he said. We ran to the car, and I drove off to our hotel. I remember driving, but I don't remember getting to our condo. The rest of the story is from our guy friends telling us what happened. Apparently, we walked into them, and the guys asked us where we had been because it was already nighttime, and we were supposed to meet up to barbecue some hot dogs. They said we didn't say a word and that we just walked to our room, closed the door, and passed out. We didn't come until the next day, and both of us had excruciating headaches as if we had drunk a whole bottle of cheap vodka by ourselves. Thank you, Vincent. I wish I could thank you. I hope you're out there hearing this, and you remember the brunette and blonde little girls that you saved that day on the island. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.